The Great Chamber of the Galactic Union was never used lightly. Floating in space above a dead star, protected by energy shields and cloaked from all sensors, it was a place reserved only for the most serious matters in the galaxy. The last time it had been called into session was 100 years ago, when the virus from the dark sector had nearly consumed half the known systems. Now, once again, the chamber buzzed with quiet fear. Representatives from over 30 starfaring species sat around the long circular table, their eyes focused on the central hologram, a flickering blue map showing red movements along the outer rim. No one spoke at first. The silence wasn't because they had nothing to say. It was because they all knew what the signals meant. Human fleets were mobilizing. And when human armies moved, something terrible always followed. The speaker from the Zelorith Confederacy, a tall insectoid creature with wings folded behind his back, was the first to break the silence. "This cannot be ignored," he said. "The last time they moved in numbers, 3 empires disappeared from the galactic charts. They do not declare war. They do not give warnings. They act, and when they act, there is no stopping them." His voice shook slightly, and even those who had never feared the Zelorith before now saw a new kind of fear in his tone. Beside him, the soft-blooded ambassador from the Luminary Alliance raised a trembling hand and spoke, her voice low. "Do we know why? Why are they gathering forces again?" A new hologram rose from the center. This one showed the ruins of a small human colony, burned and lifeless, its atmosphere stripped, its defenses crushed. A rogue warlord from the Thrixalian domain had attacked it without warning, thinking it would be easy prey. The images showed something worse than destruction. They showed a challenge delivered directly to Earth. One by one, the council members leaned back in their seats. They knew the humans would not ignore this. The Thrixalian warlord, proud and foolish, had no idea what he had provoked. He had believed the rumors that humans were weak, that they had grown soft and peaceful after years of silence. He had forgotten that humans never forgot. They were not a race of revenge seekers or conquerors, but they were something even more dangerous. When they fought, they did it to survive. And survival was a language humans spoke better than any species in the galaxy. The representative from the Vothan Republic, a species known for logic and emotionless calculation, stood and said plainly, "We must not interfere. We must stay out of their way." Murmurs spread across the table. He continued, "If we choose sides, we become targets. The humans will not forgive, but they will focus. If the Thrixalians are their target, then let it be only them." But it was not that simple. The Thrixalian domain had allies, treaties, pacts. Many species in the chamber had signed agreements that would drag them into this coming conflict if they didn't act fast. The humans would see those alliances as signs of support. There would be no negotiations once the war began. The humans had a history of finishing what they started. Their armies were not just made of soldiers. They were made of planners, engineers, medics, and leaders who had studied every possible battlefield. They trained in deserts, oceans, frozen planets, and asteroid belts. They fought in silence, in fire, and even in vacuum. Where other species relied on brute strength or technology, humans used both and added something far more dangerous: creativity. A transmission arrived mid-meeting. It was short, but everyone recognized the voice. General Cal Monroe of Earth's Unified Defense Command. Calm, steady, and cold as space itself. To the Galactic Union, Earth has no interest in war, but our people were attacked. Our colony destroyed. Our children lost. We are responding. Do not interfere. Stay neutral, and you will remain safe. Choose sides, and you will live with the consequences. The message ended. Nothing more. No threats. No shouts. Just truth. The kind of truth that made hearts stop and minds race. The silence in the room was now heavier than before. Some species had faced humans in the past. Few remained to speak of it. A century ago, during the Ember Rebellions, A coalition of 10 species had tried to remove human settlements from a resource-rich system. They believed humans would surrender easily. Instead, they had witnessed something unexplainable. Human soldiers fought in the worst conditions imaginable. Even when surrounded, they didn't break. They built weapons from scraps, used enemy gear, and adapted so fast it felt like they had lived on that planet for generations. By the end of the conflict, only 2 species remained in the coalition, both permanently weakened, both vowing never to provoke humanity again. The rest disappeared, some absorbed into human-controlled systems, others simply gone. Back in the chamber, a quiet vote was held. Most hands, or tentacles, claws, and appendages, rose in agreement. The Galactic Union would declare strict neutrality. They would not support the Thrixalians. They would not stop the humans. They would simply watch and hope that this time, the storm passed quickly. But deep down, every representative knew something terrifying. When humans went to war, it never ended quickly. It ended completely. As the meeting adjourned, the delegates left in silence, each one returning to their ships, their homeworlds, and their people with the same message: stay out of the way. Across the stars, communication channels lit up. Orders were given to halt trade with Thrixalian allies. Observers were dispatched to watch human fleet movements. Rumors spread like fire. Earth's main fleets were already in motion, their black ships slipping through space like ghosts. No one knew when they would strike, but they would. And when they did, the galaxy would once again remember why human armies were the most terrifying force ever known. Not because they hated war, but because when forced into one, they fought like a species with nothing to lose and everything to protect. The Thrixalian warlord, known across his worlds as General Korvax the Unbroken, stood atop a cliff of black stone on the planet of Draxus IV, watching as his massive army prepared for war. Hundreds of thousands of towering Thrixalian warriors moved in formation, their armor glinting under the triple suns, their war beasts howling in the distance, their weapons charged and polished for what Korvax thought would be a swift and glorious battle. Behind him stood the commanders of the domain, smug and confident, their pride swelling with every new regiment arriving through the teleport gates. For generations, the Thrixalians had ruled through brute force. Their bodies were made for war, 10 feet tall, covered in armored scales, born in gravity 3 times that of Earth. No army had ever stood against them on open ground and lived to tell the tale. So when the message came that a human battalion had landed on Draxus IV to respond to the colony massacre, Korvax had laughed. Only a few thousand. Against his millions. It was a joke. He didn't even bother to send his full army at first. He believed it would be over by nightfall. But when night came, something strange happened. The humans did not retreat. And worse, they did not die. The first contact occurred in the dense shadow jungles near the ruined mining facility, where a Thrixalian scout unit vanished without a trace. No signs of battle, no comms, no bodies, just silence. Korvax sent more scouts. They too disappeared. Then, as the second sun dipped low behind the hills, a wave of static hit the Thrixalian comm channels. Screams echoed briefly through the frequencies before cutting to silence. It wasn't an attack, it was a warning. When his main forces finally moved into the jungle, they found nothing but traps. Not the primitive kind, but expertly placed ambushes that destroyed vehicles, scattered formations, and isolated squads. Snipers picked off leaders in seconds. Drones flew silently through the trees, marking targets and relaying positions to unseen soldiers. Then, just as the Thrixalian forces tried to regroup, the humans appeared, not from the front, but from behind, from the trees, from the shadows. They moved like ghosts, silent, fast, coordinated, each one covered in camouflage, blending perfectly with the dark environment. Their rifles were quiet, their aim perfect, and their discipline unshakable. They didn't fight for glory or noise. They fought to end the fight as quickly as possible. Thraxalian warriors screamed and charged, only to fall before they could even swing their massive blades. They expected fear from the smaller humans, but found none. In fact, it was the humans who radiated a terrifying calm, like they had done this before, too many times. By midnight, the Thraxalian front line had collapsed. Korvax couldn't believe the reports. Over 10,000 of his soldiers lost, and not a single human body recovered. Desperate, he called in air support, only to find his carriers disabled by precise orbital strikes. His radar towers went dark. His commanders began to panic. In every war they had fought, strength and numbers were enough. But now, they were facing an enemy that didn't play by their rules. Human tactics shifted constantly. One moment they used long-range weapons, the next they were close, enough to plant charges and disappear. They didn't just destroy supply lines, they used them to feed themselves and left nothing behind. Human soldiers didn't rely on orders, they adapted, helped each other, moved in small groups with deadly efficiency, and even when wounded, they fought harder, never begging, never surrendering. Some Thraxalians began to speak of myths, stories whispered by older races, about the time humans turned the tide of an entire galactic war by sheer willpower and unity. At first, Korvax dismissed these stories as nonsense. Now, he wasn't so sure. He ordered all remaining forces to pull back to the fortress city of Roger. A wall of steel. It had never fallen in Thraxalian history, but the moment the gates closed, a human voice echoed through the city's external speakers. It was a calm female voice, polite, almost gentle. "This is Commander Elena Riker of the Earth Response Unit. We ask only for justice. You destroyed our people. Now you will be disarmed. If you surrender, we will offer peace. If you fight, we will end this." For a moment, Korvax considered replying, but his pride wouldn't let him. He launched all remaining weapons in a massive barrage toward the jungle. But nothing hit. The humans had already moved. Moments later, the city's power grid went down. The skies turned dark. Then came the sound of footsteps. Not loud, but organized. Not many, just enough. Human squads breached the city walls using tunnels they had dug in silence. No explosions, no grand assault, just quiet infiltration and precise action. One by one, Thraxalian defensive systems were taken offline. Their leaders were captured without a fight. And then Korvax himself was dragged from his command tower by two human soldiers, one half his size, who moved with practiced ease. They didn't speak. They didn't gloat. They simply handed him over to their commanding officer and left. The war on Draxis IV ended in less than 3 days. When the Galactic Union observers arrived, they found human medics tending to wounded Thraxalians, offering food, water, and even medical support. Not out of kindness, but because humans never saw enemies the way others did. Once the fight was over, it was over. They had no interest in conquest. They simply wanted justice. General Korvax, once feared across 5 systems, now sat silently in a containment cell, unable to understand what had happened. He had not lost to monsters. He had lost to people. People who had been underestimated for too long. The message spread quickly across the stars. Never mistake humanity's silence for weakness, or their patience for fear. Because when humans finally move, they do so with the full weight of survival, unity, and a level of strategy that no brute strength can match. Even after the fall of Draxis IV, many still refused to believe what had happened. Across the galaxy, powerful empires debated the reports, calling them exaggerated tales made to boost human pride. The Thraxalians, once feared across 5 systems, had been defeated not by technology alone, but by something far more dangerous. And yet, the true nature of that danger was still unclear. In the Galactic Council chambers, officials argued whether human success was due to luck, hidden weapons, or unknown tactics. But Admiral Thalen, an experienced tactician of the Xarn Dominion, wasn't interested in political debates. He had fought many battles and respected the patterns of war. But with humans, there was something missing. Something he could not see, could not calculate. The reports described no superweapons, no unbeatable armor, no mind control devices. Instead, they spoke of precision, patience, and psychological warfare. Thelen requested to study the human strategies closely. With permission granted, he visited the former battlefield of Draxus IV. There he didn't see scorched earth or giant machines. He saw surgical precision. Every destroyed outpost had been hit at its weakest point. Every supply chain had been cut in places that would cause the most chaos. It wasn't brute force. It was perfect understanding of the enemy. He began to suspect that the real power of the humans was not in their weapons but in their minds. Weeks later, a secret report reached Thelen's desk. It came from a Xarn scout ship that had followed a human fleet quietly, tracking it to a cold and distant moon in the outer regions. What they discovered shook him. The humans had no huge military base there. What they had was a training ground, vast, hidden in the ice, with structures built underground. And what was happening inside it didn't make sense at first. Young humans, some barely adults, were being trained not only in weapons or machines, but in scenarios that were unpredictable, harsh, and full of emotional stress. They were taught to stay calm in chaos, to think while tired, to lead while injured, to solve problems without panic. They practiced teamwork in pitch darkness, and were tested against time disasters. Some were made to survive alone in frozen wilderness for weeks and still complete their objectives. There were no fancy simulators, just cold, reality-based training. The instructors were veterans, quiet, cold-eyed, and unshaken. These were not soldiers made to follow orders blindly. These were minds built to handle the worst and still remain sharp. That's when Thelen understood the truth. The real weapon was not in their hands. It was their mindset. He returned to the council and presented his findings, but most laughed. They didn't believe that something as simple as mental training could be more dangerous than ships and guns. Thelen warned them. Humans fought like hunters, not like warriors. They learned from every loss, adapted after every mistake, and never gave the same response twice. Where other species relied on traditions or ancient tactics, humans built new methods in every battle. And what made them truly terrifying was not their hatred, but their control. They never wasted resources on revenge or pride. They fought with cold logic, even when angry. They protected each other like family and could turn any place, even a destroyed battlefield, into a base of operation. They didn't need superior numbers or advanced tech. They only needed time, and they would build victory from pieces. Soon after, another world called Zorvith Prime came under attack from pirates supported by the Slavian cartel. The planet's leaders, proud and wealthy, refused human assistance at first. But when their defenses fell and the capital was under siege, they sent a desperate request to Earth. A small unit of humans arrived, only 50 soldiers. The cartel mocked them. 50 soldiers against an army of thousands. It was madness. But in 2 days, the invaders were gone. No large battle had taken place. No grand announcement was made. One by one, the cartel's ships exploded in orbit. Their officers vanished in the night. Their ammo stores went up in flames. Panic spread among the pirates, and they fled the planet, chased not by armies, but by the fear of something they couldn't see. When Zorvith officials asked how it was done, the human commander simply said, "We used what was already there." That was their other hidden skill. They used the enemy's own weakness against them. They listened, observed, and waited. Then they struck once, hard and final. The news of this event reached every corner of the galaxy, and fear began to grow. Not the kind born from violence, but from understanding. If 50 humans could dismantle a full invasion, what could 500 do? Or 5,000? The unseen weapon was not a laser or a drone. It was the human ability to stay calm under fire, to turn survival into an art, to teach even their youngest recruits how to fight with brains, not just strength. It was their way of thinking, moving, planning, always one step ahead, always adapting. While other species built bigger weapons, humans built better minds. And when the galaxy finally realized it, it was already too late. Because by then, humans didn't need to prove anything. Their silence, their discipline, their calm focus, it became the most feared thing of all. And those who once mocked them now watched the stars carefully, whispering one truth that echoed through every system. Never let the humans in, because once they arrive, you won't see the weapon until you've already lost. The Council of Allied Worlds had finally reached its breaking point. After years of dismissing warnings, ignoring evidence, and underestimating the rise of human power, they now stood face to face with something they didn't understand and could no longer deny. The human fleets were not spread wide across the stars, nor were they boasting in numbers or brute force. Instead, a single message from Earth had shaken every military leader. We will not be the first to strike, but we will be the last. That one sentence was enough to trigger emergency meetings across empires, each trying to guess when and where the humans would make their next move. For months, rumors flew like wildfire. Some said a new superweapon had been built. Others claimed Earth had allied with ancient species hidden beyond known space. But no real proof ever came. Instead, planets that once mocked humanity began strengthening their borders. Armies were positioned, fleets were sent out, and billions were spent building defenses on every world close to human space. Among them, the fortified planet Zorthal Prime became the center of attention. It was chosen as the final line of defense, a place where, if the humans ever attacked, the galaxy would make its last stand. 72 battlecruisers, 15 orbital stations, and over 1 million soldiers were deployed there. Week after week passed, and nothing happened. Patrols saw no sign of human movement. There were no ships, no probes, not even signals. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. The soldiers on Zorthal grew tired, then nervous. The commanders stayed sharp, but doubt began to spread like a virus. Whispers floated through the bunkers. Maybe the humans had already infiltrated. Maybe they were waiting for the right moment. Or maybe they had something else in mind. Something worse. The silence became a weapon itself. The idea of the attack, more than the attack itself, began to crush morale. People who had trained for years started making mistakes. Arguments broke out. Paranoia took hold. Some officers began suspecting their own soldiers of being human spies in disguise, yet not a single shot had been fired. Then one morning, a strange report arrived from a scout drone. It had picked up movement near the asteroid belts beyond the system. Not ships, not weapons, just strange energy readings, patterns that looked like artificial signals buried under natural interference. Within hours, the command center went into full alert. Every station on Zorthal was locked down. Fighters were scrambled. War protocols were activated. They waited again. Nothing came. Days passed, then weeks. The readings disappeared. Engineers checked the scanners, but found no fault. Analysts said it was likely a natural event. Still, the fear didn't leave. A strange thing began to happen. Officers stopped trusting their screens. Soldiers began questioning orders. And in the silence, an invisible war began. A war of fear, of waiting, of not knowing when the real fight would start. The best trained forces in the galaxy were breaking down, not from battle, but from the idea of battle that never came. And then, like a cruel joke, a message arrived. A short, simple file beamed into the Zorthal command network from an unknown origin. The screen lit up with one sentence. The last stand never happens, because we never let it reach that point. No voice, no name, just those words. At first, they thought it was a hack, but no one could trace it. No one could stop it. The message spread to every station, every bunker, every ship. It played again and again until the system was reset. And just like that, everything changed. Without firing a single shot, humanity had done the unthinkable. They made their enemy prepare for war, made them fear a battle that never came, and broke their will from the inside. The mighty stand that was supposed to protect the galaxy turned into a symbol of failure. Soldiers abandoned their posts. Fleets returned home. Zorthal was left half-defended, not because it was attacked, but because the fear of attack became too heavy to bear. The galaxy had built its greatest defense, and humanity had walked right past it, without moving an inch. Historians would later call it the last stand that never happened, a turning point where minds were defeated before bodies ever entered the battlefield. No one could understand how humans did it, but those who had studied their history knew the truth. Humans had faced extinction before, by their own hands, by nature, by war. They had learned that the greatest victory wasn't in destruction, but in control. Their unseen weapon was not fear itself, but the silence between fear and action. And from that day forward, no one dared to stand against them, because the galaxy had finally learned, when it comes to humans, the real danger begins not when they fight, but when they wait. The galaxy was no longer the same. After the collapse of Zorthal's mighty defenses without a single human soldier stepping foot on the ground, the fear of Earth's silent strength had spread faster than any fleet could travel. Whispers filled every council hall and command ship, not about weapons or armies, but about human strategy. How they used silence like a knife. How they let fear do the work of thousands of guns. How they had reshaped war itself into something unrecognizable. The once proud empires of the stars, who had called humanity primitive and weak just decades ago, now watched the skies with quiet dread. But even as paranoia grew, Earth remained strangely quiet. No declaration of war, no demands, no ships crossing borders. It was as if the humans had made their point and stepped back. But behind the quiet surface, something was happening. Something that would send a message not just to the known galaxy, but to any future civilization that dared underestimate the people of Earth. On a forgotten moon near the border of neutral space, deep beneath the surface, an ancient communication array, long abandoned by the old empires, suddenly powered on. The controls had been repaired, modernized with human hands, and directed by minds trained in secrecy. A group of scientists and war veterans stood in silence as the final command was entered, the signal calibrated not for one world, but all of them. It was time to speak, not through threats or weapons, but through truth. The message was not coded, not hidden in puzzles or wrapped in riddles. It was simple, clear, and carried in every major language known to the galaxy. As it echoed from system to system, carried on the same frequencies used by trade ships and diplomatic channels, it could not be ignored. Screens lit up on battleships, in council halls, even in civilian homes. No one could stop it. The words appeared, followed by a single voice, calm, human, unshaken. To all who hear this message, know this: humanity did not come to conquer your stars. We came because we were pushed. We came because you thought we were nothing. You laughed at our weaknesses. You tested our limits. You studied our blood like it was a puzzle. But we survived, not through luck or numbers, but because we adapt. We remember, and we learn. Every betrayal, every insult, every strike against our people became a lesson. And now you fear us, not for our ships, but for our silence. Not for our weapons, but for what you don't understand about us. That fear is your creation, not ours. As the message continued, leaders froze in place. Some tried to cut the feed. Others simply listened, their faces pale. The voice spoke of the council's secret meeting, the failed last stand, the unseen weapon that never needed to fire. It did not accuse or threaten. It simply told the truth. Then came the final words, the ones that would be remembered for centuries, carved into databanks, quoted in classrooms, and whispered in war rooms. We do not seek war, but we will never run from it again. If you come for us, know that we will not destroy your armies. We will destroy your will. The stars do not belong to the strongest. They belong to the ones who survive the longest. We are humanity, and we are still here. When the message ended, there was silence again, but this time it felt different. Not the silence of waiting, not the silence of planning an attack. It was the silence of understanding something deeper, that humans didn't need to invade to win. They didn't need to conquer to lead. They had changed the rules by simply refusing to play the old game. The message had no coordinates, no ship signatures, no way to trace it back. It had been sent from everywhere and nowhere. Some believed it came from a human fleet hidden in deep space. Others believed Earth itself had become a communication hub, controlling ancient tech lost to time. But the truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what the message had done. It had ended any thought of war. In the months that followed, something unexpected happened. Old enemies of humanity began reaching out, not with weapons, but with peace talks. Not because they wanted to be allies, but because they didn't want to be the next to break under fear. Treaties were signed. Borders were redrawn. Surveillance around human space dropped as empires quietly backed away. And Earth, it remained quiet, rebuilding, observing, saying nothing. But now, the galaxy listened even when humanity stayed silent, because the real weapon had never been a fleet or a bomb. It had been the human mind, sharpened by centuries of struggle, made patient by pain, made powerful by understanding. The message to the stars was not just a warning. It was a mirror held up to the galaxy, showing them what they had created when they mocked a species that refused to die. And from that day forward, in every corner of the galaxy, there was an unspoken agreement. You do not provoke Earth. You do not challenge the humans, because you may win a battle. But the war is already lost the moment they decide to fight it.